Well, you're all looking very happy. Let's hope it stays that way. I've been thinking quite hard about the conference title, this word community, communities. Thinking about that can take you a long way. It's important that we realise we're members of quite different kinds of language teaching communities, teaching for different purposes in different ways, that you just can't find one simple kind of solution. At the same time, we are all in the same community because what we're doing, teaching English, what we have in common is our concern with language, the English language, with its grammar, vocabulary, pronunciation, ways of using it. And my concern is mostly with that part, with community rather than communities today, with what holds us together, language. Communities are evolving, changing extremely fast at the moment with all the new ways we have of approaching language with new technology. So the idea of community is really a sort of big, complicated, rather difficult to pin down idea. Same is true of language. Language develops, and it's enormous, and it's quite difficult to pin it down. And people get nervy about exactly that fact, that language changes, and changes perhaps without consulting them. When I was a lad a long time ago, I didn't want to be a teacher of English. I wanted to be a world-famous mountain explorer. And I read everything I could find about mountains. I'd never actually seen a mountain, lived in the English Midlands. But I read so much that I actually knew all about mountains. And I studied books on rock climbing, the techniques of rock climbing, using pitons and ropes and artificial aids. So I became quite expert on rock climbing. And when I saw my first mountain in the English Lake District at the age of 18, I selected what looked to me like a lower intermediate rock face. Rehearsed in my mind everything I'd learnt about rock climbing, and I started up it. Discovered very quickly, to my surprise, that the rocks had not read the same books. And in fact, I was lousy at rock climbing, and so I never became a world-famous mountain explorer. And so here I am. I had a similar experience, I guess, with other things. I was awfully good at French at school. I used to come top in the French exams. My French was great. And that was all right until years later I got to France. You know what I'm going to say. I discovered that the French had not learned French from the Clarendon French course. They taught it all wrong, much too fast. And I came to the conclusion that the trouble with languages is mainly the native speakers. Without them, everything would be fine. But years later, I went to live in France, and actually my French got quite good. I got to the point where I could swear in French, and I knew lots of slang, and I could have passionate arguments in French. Not pretty good. I wasn't a native speaker. It was okay. That was a long time ago, and if I go back to France now, I discover that without consulting me, they have changed it all. If I now try to use my French slang, they look at me as if I've come out of some spaceship. What planet is this guy from? Well, it doesn't matter much to me because I'm not a teacher of French, and I live in Britain, so I can keep track up to a point of what's happening in the language. But it is a thing that worries language teachers. Language is changing. It often breaks the rules that they've learnt and that they teach. And they get nervous about it. I think we're a profession of worriers, aren't we? We worry. Here's a couple of language teachers worrying because they've seen something in a book that breaks the rules they taught. And this worry can turn into full-scale panic. There's a language teacher who has come across the phrase, "I'm loving it." Oh God, what's happening? Well, what we're going to talk about is two things, really. We're going to talk about some things that are happening in English, and what, if anything, I think teachers should do about these things. What's happening in the language? Well, for one thing, systems change and reorganise themselves. Take English modal verbs, may, must, can, might, and so forth. They got complicated, rather overlapping meanings, and these change a bit over the course of time. So here is something that my daughter might say, but I wouldn't say. When would she say this? Well, imagine that my daughter and her husband come to visit us, and in order to prove that I'm still as young and fit as I ever was, I climb a tree in the garden. I get back down with some difficulty without killing myself. And my daughter says, "Dad, that was a crazy thing to do. You may have killed yourself." For me, that's very strange, because in my English, "you may have killed yourself" means perhaps you killed yourself. Clearly, I didn't. I was still there, breathing heavily, but still alive. I would have to say, "you might have killed yourself," to mean it could have happened, but it didn't. So there's a small change, but plenty of those things around. Systems are reorganising themselves.
Oh, that's too much. No, no.
Who is doing this to me?
Left.
Could the person just...
Kicsit azért följebb.
Okay.
We are back into the... Just a minute.
Short break.